Hansen here from NFL Red Zone. I hope you're checking out 1 hour of 5 Yard Rush, one of the best podcasts on NFL football in the UK.
What's happening, Rush Nation? Here we are back with another show. It is me. There was supposed to be a guest. That fell through until later next month, but we've got guests lined up for the next month. So it is exciting times and looking forward to bringing you some Supreme content as we're getting into the heart of fantasy season now. So it is me just for one more week, and then we will start having some guests to pile through and share a lot of great insights. The show next week is going to be absolute fire with our guy, Jim Coventry from RotoWire. We're going to be looking at all these coaching changes, what that's going to mean to some of the offenses and go through. But just going to put on a quick show today just to talk about ADP. What's the current ADP? What is it that we're being sort of told is the value of these fantasy players in 2025 so far? And what do we think of them, and where do we think this is going to lie? So we're going to get into that in just a minute. First thing I'm going to say is it's first podcast I've done since I'm 40. So that's a new one. I was 40 on Wednesday. Thank you very much for anyone that sent me well wishes. It definitely meant a lot to me for that. To get that, I did work most of the day Wednesdays. It's been a long week for me with the travel, but it's been great. And then, starting to see some copies of the Fantasy Football Playbook in the Wild. You can get a copy of that. It will be in the show notes below, so you'll be able to get access to them. So please make sure you do buy a copy, support the pod. You can buy it 2 places, either from Amazon or on the Patreon, and you can get access to it direct product in there without being a Patreon. So a couple of different ways to get it. Lots of great content in there, but more importantly, it's going to have the rankings and projections, and you can create custom T-sheets for the Scottish Bowl and any other sort of really custom weird league that you're in. It's got IDP in there. It's got everything in there. So it's a really deep, rich tool. There's lots of other tools and data, touchdown regression, the points against streaming metrics. You have access to all of that data. So there's lots of really cool stuff that you'll have access to, that you'll be able to access and really sort of utilize and make the most out of. So, please do buy the book. It's a lot of use and a lot of fun to put together, but it's also a lot of fun when you get some great reactions and a lot of great tools in there. So make the most of that. Nothing like it in the market. I promise you, you'll get great value for money out of that and win some leagues off of the back of those. Let's get into the main topic, which is looking at ADP. Now, I'm going to use here some ADP from Fantasy Pros. This ADP, again, just comes across a few different sources. And again, so it's got ESPN really is where these sources are coming from. So it's not Sleeper. It's going to be slightly different. And I'll try and find the Sleeper ADP at some point, and we'll kind of do this show fairly regularly to check out movement and where we are. But it's a nice sort of gauge just to see sort of where we are, what we believe is going to happen for this year, and how we're feeling about some of these ranks, because I think some of them are a little bit wonky at this stage. So let's get into this. Chase and Jefferson at 1 and 2 in a PPR league doesn't feel too egregious. Does kind of feel like that's kind of right for where we are and what we know, and it's the sort of safe play. So it does give you that before you start to get into these running backs. Saquon Barkley at 3 kind of makes sense. This is where I'm starting to fall off a little bit. Bijan Robinson at 4, expecting him to be the RB2. Obviously, he's a phenomenal talent, but to have him there, I feel, is a bit of a reach. And maybe there's people that feel like you'll get the consistency there. I don't know. I feel like it is a little bit difficult to judge that he is going to be the RB2 in fantasy football this year. And I just think as a result, you've got to be a bit careful, because that's a premium price you're paying for a player. Is his ceiling really going to be there? That's one to really look out for and see if that is the case. I'm not sure personally that is going to manifest, but that's one to definitely keep an eye on, and so one that you definitely can as well. But yeah, I do feel that that's a little steep. I'm just pulling out my projections here, just to kind of see where I've got players, and I have Bijan Robinson. Now, it's fairly close. I have him at 6. So I am a little wonky on who my 2 is, so that's fine. My 3 is, so that's fine. But anyway, I do think that's high for what you're getting. CD Lamb at 5 feels high as well. Gibbs, yeah, I can't really argue it at RB3, 6. I don't have him there, but I get it. He's a safe pick there. Puka Nacua is an interesting one with Devontae Adams there. Don't know if I trust that. Neighbors, I think, is safe here. Christian McCaffrey, I think, is a value if you're getting him here at 9. I think Ashton GT, this is far too high. I think you're buying the absolute ceiling. I'm not sure I want to do that in redraft in PPR this year. So there we go. And I like Amon-Ra St. Brown. And in these sort of picks here, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas, Derrick Henry, these are all feeling a lot more like picks. I think if I'm looking at values here, I really like these two. I really like Jonathan Taylor here. I think Mike McConkey is really expensive here. I don't love that pick at 11 as the wide receiver 11, so 19. I don't have him in my top 12, so that does feel high for me. I don't, I still think he's got a good route in him. I'm at 15, for example, so I think this is a little rich to take him. Rashi Rice here as well, I also think is a little rich here in the second round. As is Bucky Irving. I love Bucky Irving. I think this is a little high. I do think there's a route for him to go, but I really like Bob Bowers here. If you're going for that tight end and getting that solid value here, I think Devon A. Chan is decent here, but I think Jonathan Taylor is the value of the second round here. Back end of the second feels really good to go and get him. And then, yeah, if you haven't taken tight end, Trey McBride here is a good option here. I don't like some of these running backs in this range. I do feel like we're starting to get into reach territory with some of these players. So, for example, like Chase Brown, I think, is a huge risk and reach here in this range. I think Tyreek Hill with his situation, I think, is a risk and reach here. I like Adams here. Probably a little high. Jackson Smith and Jigba maybe looks good, but I think people are buying into a volume that might not be there. So a little careful here. I do like Kyron Williams here. Recent people kind of expecting a bounce back. 13, not too bad. It's worth investing at that price, but I'm looking at the quarterbacks coming off here. Feels like a good range to pick them up. Evans here at 37 feels really good value. To get him at wide receiver 20, talking about top 12 wide receiver last year, I really love the value you're going to get here. Not sure I like Worthy at this price. McMillan at this price. Feel like this feels very much a reach. Same with Jameson Williams. I feel like that could be a reach. Whereas I'm more rather buying into the value here of the DK Metcalf, the George Kittles. Even Travis Hunter is worth it at this sort of range. I feel like this is a pretty decent price to pay. Devonta Smith at wide receiver 27 feels a great price. I feel like there's some really good value in this sort of range here. Amari Hampton is RB15. Yeah, I'll be buying into that all over the shop. Feel like this is wonderful value. Even Courtland Sutton, wide receiver 28 for Courtland Sutton. Zay Flowers, wide receiver 29. These just feel like so much better picks than what we've got up here with like 25, 26, 27, 28, 29 feels much better than 21, 22, 23, 24 for me. And then going 12 to 15 picks later, they feel really good values. If you're buying into the decline of Tyreek Hill, then you've got Jalen Waddle here at wide receiver 31. Feels like a really good pick here as well. Love Kenneth Walker at running back 16, 54. This feels good. No, I'm not buying Ridley here. I think that's a little bit high. Could happen for him, but it's a few years of non-production. RJ Harvey here, I think he's going to start to fall like a stone now. There has been a new acquisition here in Denver. So that's one I would probably be pumping the brakes on. But Joe Mixon at RB19 feels great value here. I'm not worried about Nick Chubb at all. So I feel like this is great value here to have. Joe Mixon here. Joe Burrow feels good. Alvin Kamara yet again is still phenomenal value. There's no changes. With a rookie quarterback, they're going to run the wheels off Alvin Kamara. RB20? Yeah, snap me up. Like, I'm buying this. Chris Godwin, wide receiver 34. Like, these guys who I talk about every year are criminally undervalued and always criminally overperform. And yet all of us, like, no one is really moving. Chris Olave is wide receiver 36. We're talking about dynamic player. The risk is he's one concussion away, but at this price, I'm buying in. He's the only really decent target in that offense. I'm all over this. Even Jordan Addison, wide receiver 35, I'm all in on some of these guys. Absolutely. I think there's some great value to be had here in James Conner, RB22. Deebo Samuel, wide receiver 39. Jerry Jeudy, wide receiver 38. Some phenomenal values here later on. So I just feel like once you get past like a few of these guys, I don't think I'm reaching for Marvin Harrison at 15 and Tyreek Hill or Devontae Adams, Jackson Smith and Jigba. McLaurin I would there, but the rest of them I wouldn't. I'd much rather be getting a couple of guys in this range. If I can get Evans here, great. If I don't get Evans, yeah, give me these guys. Give me the guys here, 28, 29, 30, 31. And if I miss on those, then give me these guys, 34, 35, and 36. Feels phenomenal value. There feels like there's some really good values here in these sort of middle rounds. So might be the play to go and get a quarterback up here, get your elite quarterback, and then start to cement your running back and wide receiver positions here. Just off this early ADP, I do expect a lot of this to change. Judkins at running back 24 feels like a pretty free pick. Ken Johnson at 25. These feel like values where you can really start to take a punt. Sam Laporta at tight end 4 feels like an area where you can really sort of take a punt on him as well. Matthew Golden, wide receiver 43. I'm not convinced that he's going to put up big numbers this year, but I'd be taking a punt at that. Same with Stephon Diggs. I'd be taking a punt at this range. I feel like you'll get good value depending on how the team build is going. I'd much rather take these guys than some of the guys you've got next. Isaiah Pacheco, running back 29. And Aaron Jones at 28. These guys are proven veterans who get yardage every single year. Just feels like there's such good value here versus some of the guys further up on the board. I'm not taking Mahomes as my QB6. I'd much rather wait here. Baker Mayfield's after him, which I just think is absurd given last year. Cooper Kupp, by the way, wide receiver, and Brandon Ayuk at 48 and 49 just feel like the most phenomenal values in the world. And it might blow up in your face, but that just feels like ridiculous value. Travis Kelce going like nearly pick 100. Again, just feels like ridiculous value in this range. Just feels like you have to take him there. It's like an auto pick in this range. For sure. And then we're starting to get into these sort of backups. So even like Devin Ingram here feels like an Evan Ingram, Evan Ingram, tight end 7. Yeah, I'm all over this. At pick 105, quite happily where Rashid Shaheed feels phenomenal value in this range. I think he's a real game breaker. They can give you Mark Andrews. Look how late Mark Andrews is going on. His injury problems, but still feels like great value here. Luther Burden feels like good value here to take a flyer on and see how it goes. There's some really good late round flyers in it. Javonte Williams, the only running back in Dallas really to worry about. Running back 38. I know his injury concerns, but still, at pick 120, I'm taking a go on him for sure. David Njoku feels very cheap here. Corsten Loveland feels very cheap here. There's a few players here in this range that feel really, really, really cheap that you can get in here. CJ Stroud, after a good season in his rookie year, bad season last season, got about 20. Not for me. It feels like a great value there to go in on. So there's a lot of really interesting values here. It feels very like scattergun in a lot of these places. That it feels like there's some really good value in sort of rounds 5, 6, 7, and 8, and feels like some real reaches early. Some of this being driven by like early form players, and I think we'll start to see things shake out over the coming weeks. But this is just proving to you that there's some real values to be had this year, and getting in some of these players where situations haven't changed, where there isn't any real competition for touches like Alvin Kamara. Like I'd be getting in here and just buying him all day long. Chris Godwin. I talk about the same names every year, but these are all, they're all there. I haven't even seen Brian Robinson Jr. here. Brian Robinson Jr. is all the way down at RB30. Again, just this range here. Look at the range of player you've got here. TJ Hawkinson, Brandon Ayuk, Cooper Kupp, Brian Robinson Jr., Baker Mayfield. Feel like there's 2 or 3 league winners in there, potentially. If things go right for Cooper Kupp and he eats into Jackson Smith and Jugba, that feels like that really could happen. Brian Robinson Jr. feels like he can bring really great value. Baker Mayfield can win the position. Brandon Ayuk is a former first-round pick who has proven fantasy value. TJ Hawkins has been a former tight end 1 and 2. There's some really phenomenal players in this range that you can pick up. And I just feel like you're getting them for basically free at this range. So I definitely love some of the value you're getting late on in these drafts. And it just makes me think you just don't need to panic at running back or wide receiver because it's deep this year. Running back for the first year in a while feels really deep. Like RB30, you're getting Brian Robinson Jr. That feels deep to me. Pacheco at 29, Aaron Jones at 28. These guys just feel like they're really good, solid picks here that you're getting really good value on. Running back feels deep for the first time in a while. So if you can anchor with a top running back, you can punt the position for a while, pick up Alvin Kamara as your RB2, and then get some of these guys as your running back 3, 4, and 5. Feels like a really good opportunity to exploit that. So that's one I would be looking to do for sure. So the ADP does feel a bit wonky at this stage to me. There is some great values to be had here, but this is kind of why we look at it. And I'm looking at PPR in particular because I feel like most leagues at the moment are doing PPR. I don't feel you're going to get your standard league. So if I change this to standard, this would look wonky as anything. So I think this is a really good opportunity to have a look at some of these values, and you can get this over on Fantasy Pros. Really dig into it because I think there's a lot of value to be had. Now, the one thing I always get interested in when I look at best ball, and this is pulling through from multiple results, is how much of this is being driven by the best ball world, because that's the majority of the drafts going on right now. And if you look at these ranks, they're fairly consistent. Bijan Robinson comes up a little bit here, and Justin Jefferson takes a little fall. But these numbers they look very similar to what we've seen on the previous chart. And so what goes into real interest here when we look at these, there's not too much differential here in the top 25 picks or so, or even 30 picks, is the best ball world is kind of dictating what the ADP is on ESPN and in other platforms right now as they're doing sort of early leagues because they've got the first threat. But it's a very different game. It's a very, very, very different game. When you think about best ball, you're thinking about, you don't have to do weekly lineups. You don't necessarily have to take injuries into too much consideration. You're thinking about optimal performance and you're looking for spikes. You're looking for game winners. You're not looking for consistency as such. Consistency is a bit of a killer in best ball. So what's really interesting is that people are looking for the spike plays, and that is driving the ADP in best ball, but it's also driving the ADP here in the regular redraft world. So my point on this is this ADP should change as we start to get other drafts, more qualitative drafts over the next month or two. And I will pull the sleeper ADP and do a show on this soon to start digging into that, because I think that's going to give a bit more qualitative analysis over some of the drafts. You can see there's a bit of a dynasty skew in here as well, because it's a lot of younger players. You're not like the knocks on like McCaffrey, I know he's coming off an injury, and Derrick Henry, for example, getting a bit more of a dink here than some of these other players. Jonathan Taylor, for example, is getting a bit of a dink because of his age. So there is that other piece as well where Dynasty is merging with Best Ball to kind of deliver these ADPs, which means if you're doing drafts around now, if you have, we talk a lot about contrarian plays. If you're thinking about the contrarian, I'm taking older players, I'm taking players ready to deliver now. I don't care about next year. I'm not caring about their age profile. I'm caring about previous delivery, which is why someone like Chris Godwin, someone like Alvin Kamara, for example, are there and primed to take great steps forward, because I only need them for a year and they're going to deliver for me. So I feel like that's the place I need to be, and picking these players at greater value than potentially what I'm getting here on the likes of Marvin Harrison Jr., wide receiver 15, and taking the punts on some of these other players. I think I'm looking at where I can build optimal performance, and it's that blended approach of having high ceiling players mixed in with some of those veterans that are significantly undervalued. And that's how I have tended to play over the last few years, because these veterans like Chris Godwin, like Alvin Kamara, like Brian Robinson Jr., these guys are undervalued every single year. And because they're undervalued, it means I can get them at a price I feel really good at taking them, and being able to smash that button. And that for me is really going to play nicely into this. DK Metcalf is just, for me, a wide receiver 25. I get it. It's not in the best offense, but they paid a lot to get him. Just feels like there's a great opportunity here to take DK Metcalf off the board and get a great value on him. And again, Chris Olave kind of a forgotten man, but I'll be taking a range here at wide receiver 36. If he stays healthy, he will outperform that. The question is whether or not he could survive another concussion. Yet there's some great players in here in this range that you can really pick up. Again, Stephon Diggs, it could be a wide range of outcomes, but wide receiver 44, I'm buying into this as well as I'm buying into these running backs in this range. I just think your path to victory really widened by taking a few of these veteran players that are widely forgotten about. And the values you're getting on like a Kelsey and Mark Andrews is just ridiculous. Like it just says to me, if you don't get one of the top 2 tight ends, you can fade it and go and get one of those guys later. That feels like a really good play. Even Evan Ingram and David Njoku are down there. I feel pretty good about fading tight end 3, tight end 4, for example, like the Kittle here in this range. Feels like one I can fade. The Porter feels all right in that range, but actually with the players going around him, I might fade him significantly more. And I might wait for like the Hawkinson, Kelsey, Evan Ingram, Mark Andrews, Johnny Smith range. That feels like the kind of range I want to be buying my tight end this year, because it feels like the value is really there. They're not going to finish too far behind tight end 3, and I don't know if I want to pay the premium on Bowers and McBride, considering the other players I can get in the realm here that are really going to anchor my draft. So, it'd be nice to walk away with a McCaffrey or a Barkley. If you can't walk away from there, I'd probably be looking at a Neighbors or a Sam Brown. If I can get one of those 4 players, if I'm not picking up here, kind of feels like a good place to then come back and get like a Jonathan Taylor. Feels like an auto second round pick here, or a Derrick Henry if he falls. And then solidifying that with a 3rd round swing pick and trying to pick another receiver or even a quarterback here doesn't feel too bad. So you could go and get, I don't really love a lot of these players in the 3rd round at this stage. Like, I don't really want to pay up for Jacobs there. I don't want to pay Brown's price. Don't want to pick up maybe McLaurin. Kyron Williams feels good there. I don't mind taking him there, but I'd probably be looking at the Jackson, Josh Allen, maybe coming back, getting a Mike Evans feels really good there. And then maybe looking at this and thinking, I want to get into this range, maybe Amari Hampton, or if I want to take a receiver, maybe like a Cortland Sutton feels good. Maybe even take a wild pick on Travis Hunter because his wide range of outcomes, or DK Metcalf, they feel really good in this sort of range. And then just sort of going wide receiver, running back, fill those rooms up, get a Jalen Waddle, get a Kenneth Walker, feel really good here. Joe Mixon and Alvin Kamara feel great. Chris Godwin, Chris Olave, there's a lot of really good options. Amari Hampton would pass. And I'd just sort of be double dipping backwards and forwards and just filling up my wide receiver and running back rumors in these rounds. Then I'll go and get my tight end somewhere down here. And then pick up, say, some really value wide receivers here who are going to give me my cream with some value running backs here like Brian Robinson Jr. That kind of feels like how I want to build out my team. Get a stud running back, a stud wide receiver, a stud quarterback in my first 3 rounds, and then start to supplement and build from there. That kind of feels like how I want to build a team this year based off this ADP. Now, this could really change, as I said. This could really change over the coming weeks and months. Starting to really pour forward and think about how we're going to try and drive forward the changes in terms of we hear more from camp, we start to hear some news, things are going to change quite significantly. So how is this going to look as we're starting to get more news filter through? But I will say that my projections feel very wonky to this ADP, and I like that. I love being contrarian. I love being against the consensus, against the groupthink. I love being in that realm where people are looking at my drafts thinking that just doesn't look right, because then they don't know where I'm drafting next. They don't know what I'm doing. They're really stuck in this point of thinking I need to take this player here because groupthink and consensus says I take that. If I work out where they're going, that gives me the opportunity to see what the board is doing 2-3 rounds from now. And that's going to give me my opportunity of where I can buy and value players more and get even better value driving down to me. Don't shoehorn your strategy based on what other people are doing. Go against the grain, be different, look at where the values are falling and look at how deep this is, deep at running back, deep at wide receiver this year. You don't need to shoehorn into a specific roster construction build. You can look at other ways of building this and going out from there. So that would be my big advice, especially with the ADP as it stands right now. And again, we'll do this with sleeper ADP. We'll see how much it changes. But this ADP is being driven a lot by best ballers and dynasty players, which makes sense. They're the ones that are the most active. So let's see what happens when we start to see the changes in this. But if you're playing with a lot of these guys, you kind of avoided getting the cheat sheet as to where they're thinking. In fact, what I really like looking at the ADP now is if I'm playing with a lot of active best ball players and a lot of active dynasty players, they're telling me now with this consensus pick what their strategy is, because it's not diluted with the rest of the redraft world. Those that don't have the sense to hedge and to change are going to stick to a blueprint that's very similar to this. And that's great, because some of the only redraft-only folks might just draft off ADP, and then this will change the whole map. And then you're going to be in the middle, where you're going to be the contrarian play between the two, because you're not drafting off any of this, and you're going where you want to go. And that is where you're going to be successful in leagues, because you're going to build different teams that are going to allow you to do different things. You're going to require trade assets. You're going to be more aggressive on the waiver wire, because you're going to be in a team that's ready to compete, and you're going to have different options that present themselves to you throughout the season. Now, we'll start to get really analytical with players. We'll look at schedules. We'll start to see where there's potential roadblocks in some of these values, and we're going to do that with our guests over the coming weeks. But to kind of set the stall out and set the scene, it's really important just to understand what is the world telling us right now. And it's very best ball outcome heavy with a dynasty old players suck kind of lens. And that's fine by me. In a redraft world, that suits me. I want players that are more consistent, and I want players that are going to deliver for me most weeks. And what I also want is players who are a little bit older, more experienced, and have a proven track record of results. That's going to give me more flexibility in my team to swap out players, make trades, and make the moves through the season I need to make to be successful, because the team you draft is very unlikely going to be the team that wins it for you. It's the moves you make in the middle. And that's going to be fundamentally important as you continue to build your team out through the season in all the different ways that you will. So that's what's really key. That's kind of why we do this exercise. And again, we'll do it with Sleeper. And then what we'll do is we'll start to track these trends over time. We'll start to capture these points in time. And we'll start to see where it's moving. Why are players moving up? Trying to understand that, but then still capture who the value players are. And as we continue to build this piece over the coming weeks with our guests, we're going to look at all the reasons why there's value to be had down the board, why there are areas that we can exploit as seasoned fantasy players. And again, we've talked about this the last few years on the show. We're going to build contrarian. We're going to be different to everybody else. We're going to view the fantasy world and the fantasy landscape differently. We're going to be nimble. We're going to pivot. We're not going to go in with a set mindset, and we're going to really pick apart drafts and let the value come to us and build stacked teams. And that is where we're going to build those 10-win, 11-win, 12-win teams, because we're going to see it through a different lens to everyone else. We're going to let everyone pick from their own pool of players, and we're going to pull off in different directions and walk away with a strong team. That's the plan. That's what we're going to do over the next 4 to 6 weeks with the amazing guests. So tell you some of the guests that we have coming on in the few weeks coming up. We have the amazing Jim Coventry, and we're going to do some great tactical stuff there. I'm really excited for him next week. Really great guy. We have Joe Dolan potentially coming on. We have Pat Fitzmaurice coming on. We have Joe Pisapia coming on. We're looking at getting Bob Harris of Football Guys on. You know, we're really taking this lens and going a bit deeper into all these different insights and getting some of the best in the world to come through and share all of this. And we're going to distill all that learning, mix it in with what we've got in the fantasy football playbook, mix it in from our experience and what we've done in the past to get you ready to fill those harbors with as many ships as possible. That's what we do best on this channel. That is how we're going to succeed. And I'm really looking forward to taking the journey with you over the next few weeks to get ourselves ready for fantasy season. I know it's been a rocky off season. I know that the schedule's kind of played around a bit. We haven't had the quality of guests that we normally would have. But don't worry, Rush Nation, we are back. We are back stronger. We're back fitter, and we're back to nail and dominate these leagues. Go get your copy of the Fantasy Football Playbook. Go get your copies of sign into our Patreon if you like. Go ahead, look at what we're doing, look at our projections, look at how we're viewing the world differently. Use those cheat sheets, get yourselves ready to dominate all those leagues. We'll be back on Thursday next week with Jim Coventry. Make sure you sign in for that. We've got some great news dropping early next week as well. We'll drop a special short pod to explain that. even more content for you on the 5 Yard channel. In the meantime, Rush Nation, enjoy Father's Day weekend. Make sure you hug those loved ones tight. And don't forget, as always, keep rushing.